Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. I'm your host, Dr. Alan Christianson. Look, you know that between the latest online fads and the crazy media headlines, it's easier than ever to get confused about your health. And you and I just want to feel better and live longer. We want to know what works. And we can't wait for further studies. We need to make decisions today based on the best evidence we've got. Well, that's exactly what this show is here for. So let's get to it. Welcome to Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. This is Dr. Christianson here with you. So this is a pretty neat episode. I'm joined today with Patricia Pomareda. She is a integrative nurse practitioner. She was trained as a nurse practitioner, advanced training in functional medicine and integrative medicine, busy practice, enjoying life with her family, so far so good. And then in January of 2020, she became diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and she required a thyroidectomy. Now, imagine, this is a tough thing for anyone at any stage in life, but she's got a full practice, she's managing a family. Did you catch January 2020? The coming months? Yeah, she was navigating all this during the whole pandemic. So as difficult as conventional medical care can be, in the best of circumstances, this was the worst of circumstances. So it's a pretty amazing story. She went through this as a patient, but also with the knowledge of a practitioner. And she came through it. She's come to a good place now. She's found some good resources, but it wasn't easy for her, because of just how it is inherently, because of the pandemic, all these factors. And it's become a real passion of hers to help others going through the same thing. So this is about her journey through thyroidectomy and managing the system and how she can make a big difference on others who are going through that. All right, enjoy this episode, and I'll see you real soon. Hey, Dr. C here with you. Welcome to another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairytales. As promised, I'm joined here with Patricia. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
This is going to be awesome. So many people have asked about questions related to thyroid cancer, thyroid surgery, and you're in a really unique situation to have insights from like front stage and backstage about this stuff. And so, yeah, just tell us a bit about, we'll go into all this in much more detail, but you were already nurse practitioner. You've been practicing for quite a few years and something happened. So how did this play out?
So, something happened. I started having these, what I would call like these weird neurologic issues where I couldn't look at the trees move. I couldn't look at leaves move on trees. I couldn't handle the input of watching cartoons with my children. And I was getting these adrenaline dumps that I could feel in my stomach all of a sudden. At the same time, my hands began to tremble and I was having frequent bowel movements, things that were totally out of the norm for me. And this was right in the middle of the pandemic. So I did not have a lot of access to immediate care that wasn't urgent or emergent. But I knew through my training, even though I couldn't elaborate at the time because of the impact of these neural issues that were going on, I knew that something was wrong with me. And so what ended up happening was I had gone to my primary care provider, and she was like, well, you're just a mom. Everyone is having anxiety en masse. Wow. You're very tired. You're also working and you're a nurse practitioner. So on top of that, you have to deal with the whole medical side of, everything going on with COVID. And I just kept telling her, no, this is not what's happening to me. Something's wrong. But as a patient, I said, okay, if this is what you think is happening, what should we do? So, she prescribed me some medication. I believe it was Klonopin. I can't remember. And yeah, it was Klonopin. And I knew that it's extremely habit forming. I knew what it would do in terms of the pharmacology and the physiology and how it would change my brain. So I was very cautious in the amounts that she told me to use. I would use half of it. And it did help with the symptoms for a couple hours until everything came back again. And then I kind of continued my search for a functional medicine provider as well, because I can't treat myself. I needed someone to help me.
Right.
And through my experience with that provider, they said, okay, we have something going on. In the meantime, I went and had my own labs done because I'm a healthcare provider. I'm a nurse practitioner.
Right.
I have access to doing labs. So I went and had my labs done. And my first set of labs were normal, but they weren't technically optimal. And I knew that it was off, but my primary care provider said, no, these are normal. And I still said, no, something's not right. So a couple of days later, I would say about a week or two later, I went and had labs drawn again. And my thyroid hormones were still within the normal range, but the shift that had occurred in that range within that short amount of time, in my opinion, was pretty large. Mm-hmm. So I took that to my functional health provider, and they said, everything that you're having, it seems like you're having thyrotoxicosis. So then and so they put me on propranolol, and that helped so much. It really helped so much in the meantime, because it helped, propranolol helps prevent or slows down the conversion of T4 to T3. So that really helped a lot, but it still didn't address the issue. And so my primary care provider had told me, all right, let's just do an ultrasound of your thyroid. So what I kind of missed at the beginning of the story was that before having all these neurologic issues, I started having these weird panic attacks on and off that were not very frequent, but I ended up in the hospital 2019 at the ER because I had a massive sinus infection that I subsequently turned into a panic attack. And so because of that, they went ahead and did a CT scan and said, well, you have a massive sinus infection, but you also have this thing on your thyroid.
Huh. Okay.
But right now, just get your sinus infection in check. But they never really kind of told me, go get it checked out. They're just like, oh, we saw this. So going back to talking about the ultrasound, my primary care provider said, well, I'm sure it's nothing. So sometimes they find things on CT scans all the time, but let's just still go ahead and let's just follow up with a thyroid ultrasound. And so really, once they did the ultrasound, they found that I had I think it was a 3 centimeter mass on the left side of my thyroid. Yeah. So it was pretty significant.
So we're talking like close to golf ball or.
Pretty much. Yeah. And I didn't actually have, I didn't have any lumps in my neck. It was not visible at all. So once I was,
can I dig in a little bit here? So sorry. Sure. I want to know what's going on, like in your head, like emotionally at this stage. I mean, it's tough for anyone to have medical uncertainties and symptoms that no one's making sense out of and conflicting views. And I can't imagine the experience is radically worse in a clear degree. But there's another layer when you're a health practitioner, because you got that many more things to be paranoid about running through your head.
It was a lot. It was like, I know too much of what's going on. Like as soon as the biopsy,
endless possibilities.
Endless possibilities. And I knew, like, when the ultrasound report came back, like the size, like I already knew the statistics of what that meant. Like I didn't even need a biopsy. I just knew what was going to happen. Right. And so it was a lot. It was the first time that I had to come face to face with my mortality. Because it's different when you're relatively healthy and you're like, everybody knows that at some point, you're going to die. I mean, that's just life, right? It's
pretty vague. It's easy to ignore that.
Exactly. But then when someone tells you, like what happened with me, it was just a medical assistant over the phone that said, yeah, I'm sorry, you have cancer.
Oh, wow.
I was in shock. And I thought, the first thing I thought was, am I going to die? And so
you got young kids,
Yeah. And I had two young girls. I have two young girls. So it was very difficult because I knew too much. Like I was thinking of so many other things that could go wrong or what could go on. So it took a lot of self-control to be to separate myself from being a provider into just accepting that, okay, we have professionals that know what they're doing. And to just kind of take it day by day.
You're still practicing as normal, you're kind of going on with life as far as everybody else knows, or?
So what ended up happening, it was sort of a blessing in disguise, because at this point I was working in private practice. And so a lot of positions were furloughed. So I was able to be at home.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did not actually have to work at the time of my diagnosis and through treatment. So a lot of places were shut down and I was able to stay at home. So I was in a pretty lucky spot in terms of that.
Yeah. You go on. You're talking about how then you got the call and wondering what it meant. And
yeah, it was definitely not fun. I had to do everything alone because we weren't allowed to bring anybody with us. So that was very difficult. Oh. And so it was not easy. I couldn't take my husband with me to certain exams. As time went on, and as I got closer to having my surgery to have my thyroid removed, they would allow one person in the exam room with me. So, but for the most part, all of my visits were very fast, because this was in June of 2020. So we were right in the middle of everything, and everybody wanted to just get everything done quickly with the least amount of exposure. And so I kind of also felt bad for the providers on the other end, because I mean, they couldn't really spend the time with me that they wanted to. Everything would have to be done virtually, it's very different when you're newly diagnosed as a cancer patient, right? But yeah, so, things got moving very quickly, and then I went to go see I had a biopsy. I went to go see an endocrine surgeon, and he wanted to move really quickly because we didn't know how long the hospitals would stay open for certain procedures. So everything was fast. Even if I wanted to ask questions, I didn't even have the time to be able to do so, because we just needed to move forward with taking out the tumor.
We'll talk more about your role now as an advocate and resources you have for others. In some ways, your experiences could even be harder than it can be a tough thing for anyone to go through all that stuff. But given the time and given the nature of that, you got to see like the worst case scenarios of bedside manner, of not really the time to be supportive. So you got to really see how critical those parts of it are, even more than others might have.
Yeah, it really broke my heart, because I knew, I have experience as a provider, and I know, anyone who becomes a healthcare provider does so because they want to help people. And so when you become limited in that capacity and you're not able to really practice to the fullness of what you're meant to do, it's very difficult as a provider as well. So, I mean, it was scary for me as a patient, but my heart also broke for providers too, because it was difficult. But yeah, I mean, it definitely shaped everything everything that subsequently happened with me as a provider myself. And so, especially being a nurse practitioner, we're just trained a little bit differently in the medical field. We're a very patient-centered approach type of care. And so I took what I learned, and as time went on, I applied it towards my patients. And I can't tell you how much more in the beginning my heart broke even more, because I would get so many patients that would say, oh, I've gained so much weight, or, oh, I'm sad, and my primary care doctor said I'm just depressed and I just don't have enough energy to do all these things. And so they gave me an antidepressant. And then when I go look at their history, I'm like, okay, well, nobody ran like thorough enough tests. They just write you off because you're a young mother. And it's such a huge stigma that so many young mothers have to go through nowadays, because we can also be tired. We can be young and we can be tired and we can be mothers, but something can also be very wrong with us. Yeah. And so I think, for me, everything kind of happens for a reason. And I'm very I'm very fortunate. I always find that even though I was diagnosed with cancer, for me, I was very fortunate because I was able to help some more women and be able to diagnose them with thyroid disorders instead of being diagnosed as depressed.
Right.
So for me, I had to go through a lot, but at the end of the day, it was absolutely worth it because I was able to pass that experience on and help someone else, even if it's one person.
So it was a little bumpy. That's an understatement to say the least. But getting into the here's the news. Here's the diagnosis. Here's the surgery. So walk us through how things played out afterward.
So one of the biggest things that happened afterwards was that my endocrinologist would say you can live a pretty normal life after your thyroid is removed. It's one of the most curable cancers to have, and you're going to be fine. You're going to live a long and healthy life. And I thought that things would go back to normal, but they didn't. Nobody told me that I was going to gain 30 pounds. I mean, I'm tall and I was thin to begin with anyways, but still, 30 pounds in 3 to 6 months is a lot of weight to gain.
Wow.
And it's hard to deal with that. I mean, I wasn't expecting that much, but it happened and it plateaued, but it happened. I still had some lingering issues dealing with anxiety in the physiologic sense. I just would wake up sometimes in the middle of the night with my heart racing. I would still have extreme levels of fatigue. I could not tolerate hardly any form of exercise that wasn't walking at an almost, walking almost standstill type of pace.
And how far post-surgery would this time be describing?
I would say it was a good 6 months post-surgery because at the time also, my mother had passed away from COVID as well, 6 months later. And so I was already dealing with the stress of recovering from the thyroidectomy, also having subsequent treatment, but also having this huge emotional upheaval. But knowing me and knowing what I know about medicine, I wanted to try to be as nutritionally prepared for any adverse reaction that would happen. Because even though what happened to me was my removal of my thyroid, I still identified that any type of stress, whether it be emotional, physical, or metabolic stress going on, still affected me in a huge way. So, I mean, it was very difficult for me, but I always somehow knew through my training that I had to somehow create some sort of a foundation for me to begin rebuilding myself, right? I had accepted at the point after my mother had passed away that, okay, life is going to happen. Healing is not linear. I may feel better one day and something can happen, like something horrible and traumatic can happen. And that can really shift someone's physiology overall, right? But I had learned that the more practice I had with establishing a good foundation, the easier it was for me to come back from a disappointment or from a low. And so
establishing that foundation. So what did that look like? How did you go about doing that?
So it was very big for me. One of the biggest things was sweating every day, trying to sweat as much as I could. I didn't really have access to a sauna, but I knew how important sweating is. Just simple, the act of just sweating, and trying to sweat often, because I knew that my body needed to detox. And so sometimes in integrative and functional medicine, we can get so caught up with the fancy ways of how to detox this and how to, take all these toxins out, when we forget that first we have to do step 1 instead of step 100. Right. And so I wasn't doing that. I wasn't sweating every day. I mean, I was reading articles, I was doing research, but I wasn't sweating every day. So That was one of the biggest drivers for me, was sweating every day.
So not the sauna, physical activity, or what was your outlet that way? Or
well, my outlet was Peloton.
okay, cool.
Yeah, so cycling.
Sure.
That was the easiest thing for me. It was the most accessible thing for me. I could just jump on the bike real quick and sweat a whole bunch, and it was the way for me to maximize my time. So for me, it was doing that. I didn't have access to a sauna. I wish I did, but I didn't. But I would sweat every day. Optimizing the time at which I would take my thyroid hormone, making sure that I took it as early as I could upon waking up. Nothing else was taken after that. Waiting a good hour after taking my Synthroid to be able to eat anything, and learning how to plan out my supplements after that. Taking my Brazil nuts every single day for their selenium. So that was really big for me too, is actually supplementation, because I knew, because I no longer had a thyroid, I was going to automatically be at somewhat of a disadvantage in terms of optimizing absorption of hormones, right? And I wanted to do the best thing that I could do, making sure my zinc, my iron, my selenium, magnesium levels were optimal. So finding a great supplement to kind of help walk me through that was really important for me. And also checking my iron status, because the fatigue was unreal.
Iron was a big part of your journey, it sounds like.
It was huge. I mean, I was doing everything, quote unquote, right. I was taking my supplements, I was eating, I was doing everything right on time. But when I went to go do my blood work, my ferritin was like a 4.
Wow.
It was super low. And so I knew, because I was having all the symptoms of like iron deficiency, this unreal fatigue, this was the only thing. This not the only thing, but this was a major driver for my source of fatigue. So I was just kind of piecing things together. Like, what would I do as a provider for myself? Nobody's really going to do all these things for me. I have to do it for myself. So I started piecing together these things, putting together, okay, my iron is down. So I started supplementing with iron, finding the best ways to supplement, taking the iron with vitamin C. And sure enough, it wasn't maybe like a week or two later that I was able to exercise and not take a 3-hour nap after I was done. Right? I could tolerate exercise. It was wonderful. Cool. And it's just these simple changes that no one really, I'm a provider and I'm also a patient. Nobody told me that as a patient. I had to do this all by myself. So that was how I laid the foundation. And then also taking care of my adrenals is really important. So, I'm really focused on taking my adaptogens. I use a lot of ashwagandha, and I also have certain rituals that I do every day. I wake up, I try to be mindful. I have my tea in the mornings, and I go outside, get some sunlight. I live in Florida, so it's wonderful here most days of the year. We got a lot of sun. We can go out in the winter and get plenty of sun. So I would make sure that I kept on track with these little rituals, even if it was like for 5 or 10 minutes each morning. Because some days, and anybody with children knows that it's not every day is going to be the same, but if for 5 days out of the week, you can have your tea in the morning, even if it's for 5 minutes before the children wake up and are demanding everything from you, that's just 5 minutes for the start of your day. And sometimes that was the only 5 minutes that I would have. But sticking to a ritual or sticking to a schedule was extremely important in creating that foundation, because if I already had a habit established, I knew that when if something were to go wrong again and throw me off of my routine, I already knew the things that I had to do to get back on there. So I didn't really have to start from zero again. I would say, okay, today everything is really crazy, but I know I can make myself a cup of tea. This is what I have control over for today. Right.
And it might have been just the cup of tea. It might have been 5 minutes, but it was something.
Exactly. It was something. It was something to just kind of bring me back. And I also did a lot of mindfulness work. So, I mean, I don't really sit down and meditate every day. I did, however, meditate every single day before I was actually diagnosed. And that helped me tremendously. It was amazing.
When you had the marked symptoms and they weren't yet explained, you mean? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because I couldn't elaborate to people what was going on with me. It was very hard for me to say, this is what I'm feeling. It's like my words couldn't work. I almost feel like I was on the cusp of having a thyroid storm at the time. It was so many things going on. I couldn't handle anything. In my mind, I knew what was happening, but I just couldn't say it. So I was able to meditate because it was silent and I could still be in my mind and do the things that I needed to do. And it created this sense of calm in me that was amazing. I used to, before everything happened, I was like, oh, meditation is great. Yes, it's good for you. But it wasn't until I had this experience that I really understood the physiologic change that meditation causes. So I do now, I do now believe that meditation is important. It's a part of my practice now every day, but also I find ways to meditate that are not necessarily sitting down for 5 minutes and thinking. Making my cup of tea is almost like my meditation. It's like nice and warm. It's quiet. I like to listen to the water boil and it just takes me away. And so I do that for 5 minutes. It sets me up for my day. So I was able to understand how important that is. Just, eating right, exercising, setting up mindfulness habits, because everybody has a bump in the road. Little kids, they fall, they scrape their knee, they have to get up and they have to heal. And that never ends, even when you're an adult. But if we know what we have to do, we're able to get up faster and establish this resilience. And so for me, I knew that was what I wanted to do, because not that I have to work at a disadvantage, but sometimes I know that in the future, things might be off. I might have to work a little bit harder to adjust certain things. My medication will have to be changed. I may have to get blood work done more than your average person, but I know now what it is I need to do, right? So in order to create those shifts, right? So there's going to be bumps in the road, but it's for me, it's all about, okay, how we're going to get up and how are we going to, from this point on, how are we going to make that process easier? So we're not like falling back 1,000 steps, right?
That's great. I want to talk in just a bit about how this has inspired you to help kind of put together your plan and share this with others. That's super important. But I want to hear too about what you've come to see about just thyroid cancer itself. Some of the stats about it, the trends, and its overall relevance. So, yeah, what can you tell us about that?
So it was really shocking to me. I attended the Thyroid Cancer conference last year, and I was shocked to see how disproportionately women are affected. It's amazing. Men do get thyroid cancer, but for the most part, the majority of thyroid cancer patients are women, are females. And so the incidence of thyroid cancer has also increased dramatically since the 1970s, and it's just actually starting to taper off now. But if we look at the trend, one of the graphs is about an increase of almost 200%. And so a lot of this is also, can also be due to the fact that it's just being diagnosed. We have more tools to be able to diagnose it. So, it's really unclear as to whether or not there's an actual increase in it. But regardless, the rise in which we're able to detect who has thyroid cancer now, it's huge. I mean, it's one of the fastest growing cancers. It predominantly affects women. And so, and unfortunately, it can be a cancer that can be easily written off, as it was in my case. If I had not pursued more monitoring and imaging, I would have just been written off as a mom who had anxiety, a tired mom who had anxiety. So, it was
there was already some abnormalities that had shown up before then too, that were ignored.
Exactly. And it was, what was even more scary is you couldn't feel it. You couldn't palpate. There was nothing to feel on my neck.
Wow.
Which is, for a lot of thyroid cancers, people have lumps, but in my case, I didn't have that. So it was shocking to me to see, how many women, were being diagnosed with thyroid cancer. Yeah.
Well, briefly, the doctor said how this is something that's largely curable and whatnot. And that's true, but it's always early detection. There are so many cases of people who are not treated early enough along and they don't survive it. That totally happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens. And that is just so sad, because it's one of those things that if we just did an extra test that doesn't really cost that much, even if we have a doubt, we could do some imaging. Right? It's a simple blood test. It's not like it's this really complicated exam. Most insurances will cover these blood tests, and it's important for me to be able to empower other women to say, well, if something is wrong, maybe I need to do these blood tests. Maybe I need to ask for an exam. So I always tell my clients, I'm like, if something is wrong, if you're working through, your traditional insurance payer system, if something is wrong, you are paying the provider's bill. You're paying their salary. So if you want something done, have this conversation with them and say, do you think it's worth it to have a thyroid panel, to have these exams? So, I've kind of taken this also as a way to empower my clients to just have conversations with their providers and not just kind of say, they said, no, everything's fine and move on. It's a partnership where you ask questions and you're allowed to push back. You're allowed to say, well, I don't know if this is right. It's a team, right? And so I feel that it's really just kind of shaped how I send my message out to people now.
I loved how you talked about the way in which you were experiencing these symptoms, and your one primary care doctor was quick to say, well, you're a tired mom, you're working hard or whatnot. It's a busy time. But you persisted, you knew yourself and you knew your experience of life, and like, well, sure, that could happen, but this is more than that. And you pushed through on it.
Yeah, I did. And people ask me to this day, do you still have her as your doctor? And I said, absolutely. Because this is a great learning opportunity for them, right? Like, we need to work as a team. I shouldn't just dump them at the first sign that something goes wrong, because now she knows my history. We have a partnership. We work together. She's been through what I've been through with me. And now she can see that, oh, I had this one patient once that had this, and maybe I should think about testing other patients with similar symptoms, right?
Such an awesome point you just made there. I think that you yourself and anyone who's done a lot of patient care, we see many people that they've not gotten the answer they want, and they've seen so many practitioners. And to some extent, way down the road, it might get easy because everyone else has already tried everything else, but it takes some time and it takes a relationship. And yeah, don't think about finding the practitioner that never says something wrong or never rubs you the wrong way or never, dismisses you, but it's how they respond. Can they still carry on a relationship afterward, and can they still work with you and still respect you and listen to you? Because that's the thing. No one's perfect, and there's something about a depth of relationship that you can never replace. Someone else who's starting with you the first time, they will never have that perspective.
Yeah, they won't. And it was, to this day, she's, I love my doctor. I love her, and I trust her with a lot of things, and it's important. It's important for me that she sees me because if she sees me, she might see someone else, right? She might see what's going on with someone else. And that it trickles down, right? Maybe she'll be at a conference one day and say, well, this happened to me in my experience. And, these experiences trickle down. So it's like, it's not just, I'm not just living in this bubble of what happened to me. It's how is this going to affect, everyone else?
I just want to just briefly touch on this point a bit more, because I do hear many that are justifiably frustrated with the approaches that they're given and justifiably frustrated about not being diagnosed or treated thoroughly. But they'll often take that out as if it's almost some evil intent on the medical establishment, or the doctor was mean, or the doctor didn't mean. And no, everyone wants to try to help. And if there's a way in which you can interact and help them understand a shortcoming, or help them see that a different approach was useful, that's critical. All too often, doctors will have someone who an encounter may not go right, and they'll never know. The person just won't come back, and the doctor never gets a chance to learn from that or grow from that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's important. It's almost like a two-way street, right? And so sometimes I encourage people, continue with your provider, and build that relationship. And, sometimes it may not work out. Like if you've tried everything and they're blatantly rude and they're just say, oh, whatever, I don't believe you or whatever. Okay. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But it's all about communication and empowering the patient to talk to their clinician. They're allowed to ask questions. And I've found that a lot of people are afraid, but you can ask these questions. Bring in the papers that you've looked at. Bring in the research articles. Don't be afraid of offending them and their expertise. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a two-way street, and it takes a lot to find a brand new provider too, and it can be time consuming and exhausting. And having to shift your medical paperwork here and there,
Right.
I mean, if you have to do it at the end of the day, you have to do it. But if you can maintain your care with the same person, and you're comfortable, and it's a respectful relationship, it's huge in terms of managing your care moving forward, because they know you, right? You've established a comfort level.
Yeah, this is great. And I'm just thinking about how many ways in which this situation was difficult. Life gives everyone traumas. They're not all the same. Some are tougher than others. This was a tough one that you went through in terms of the timing of this. This was over the pandemic. You lost your mom. You didn't say this, but there's no good way to lose your mom. But during the pandemic, people couldn't really interact in ways they normally would have. So I'm sure there's more layers of trauma from that as well. And I think the best thing we can do is, whatever our traumas are, if we can find some way to help others go over them better, make them smoother, do it better for them. I think that's the best thing we can do in life. So I'd love to hear a bit more about what this next chapter looks like, and now how you're reaching out to and helping others go through this journey themselves more easily.
Yeah, so I've used my experience to really shape how I practice medicine. And then I've also found that there are just so many people that after treatment, even now that kind of the world is opened back up to normal, not really much has changed, surprisingly, after, from their experience to my experience. A lot of people are still kind of left with, you'll lead a normal life, and I'll see you every 3 to 6 months, and see you next time, right? And that's it. And they're just kind of left languishing, just they're kind of free floating. What do I do now? I'm not normal. My thyroid isn't normal. And so I have used my experience to kind of establish a program, a methodology. And so I call it Resilient Thyroid. And what it is it's really mostly for people who have gone through thyroid cancer treatment, have had a thyroidectomy. But this is really, it can really be adapted for anybody who wants to establish resilience in their life. And so I work through basically my experience with my providers as well. And I work through it's like almost like a 12-week program pretty much. And each quarter we go through addressing certain aspects to be able to establish a good pattern of resiliency at the end. And so my focus first is establishing, great gut health, because we want to make sure that that thyroid hormone is being absorbed properly, that our digestion is working well. So that's the first few weeks. And then we move on to a mind-body component, where we really just try to understand, okay, we need to be able to handle stressors in a certain way. We need to establish, really good habits. From then, in the third quarter, we move on to really now looking at thyroid hormone and endocrine optimization. And we look at adrenals, and we look at how to best optimize adrenal function, and how to best optimize thyroid function or thyroid hormone function, to be able at the end to have that energy that we need to really focus. And that's where we get our resilience, right? Life is going to happen. We're going to have ups and downs, but if we just have this foundation, it's great. Okay, something happened. All right, now at least I know where I need to start all over again. Okay, so they're not starting from zero. I have my plan. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay, let's start over again. I'm going to start every day by drinking my tea in the morning. This is step one. But at least it gives thyroid cancer survivors, people who are seeking resilience in their life again. My goal was to give them a platform to get that started, a framework, so that they're not free floating, languishing, like, where do I go now? Oh my gosh, what do I do? Right? It's me kind of like holding that hand out in the darkness to them, saying, we've got this. We're going to do this together, little by little, step by step, but I'm going to help you through this until we get to the end. Right. So that was my goal, really. I just want to help people. I don't want anyone to be in the position that I was at. So
that's really beautiful, and it's unique in that you went through this yourself, and you were also already a experienced healthcare practitioner. So you've got so many more insights. In a lot of cases, people lack some component of that. They lack the personal experience. Obviously, most will lack the depth of knowledge of the background. And, you used your resources and the foundational training you had to understand this much more quickly and much more thoroughly than someone could have as easily. And so now you're training someone can take that as like the starting place and not have to, they might have never worked up to that in terms of understanding, but they can not only they can start there and then apply things, personalize things further.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I see this as just like a gentle approach. There's so many things that are very like in your face these days, like do this 5-day this and 4-day this, and here's your 3-day change, and here's what you're doing wrong. And at least for me, I always sometimes felt like a lot of shame. I'm like, oh, I'm doing this wrong. Like, that's horrible, right? I never wanted to, I don't want to create any shame. I don't want to say that anybody's doing anything bad. This is just like a gentle approach. We're going to do this. It's a step-by-step process, and we'll do it together. And it's just been a great help. And one of the biggest drivers too was, for me, was being able to really look back at your resources as well. I mean, you were a huge help through this whole process as well too, just being able to identify the importance of iodine, right? I mean, that shifted so much in terms of my progress in my own symptoms, and understanding, where my sources of iodine are coming from, and just having these, approaches that are just in a way are not just so in your face. They're just, okay, here's matter of fact, here's what we can do. And, just keeping up with the latest research. And it's just been instrumental for me in so many ways. So I wanted to just thank you as well for, it's been a huge game changer for me as well. So thank you.
I appreciate that. So I'll get links for the Resilient Thyroid Methodology. People can check that out. You're opening another one up sometime soon. You're taking applications for that. And I want to hear in the last couple minutes of what's next. You working with this program and working with people, that'd be the big thing. Are there other related projects or other things you hope to achieve now from what's happened? Or
Yeah. So, my biggest focus was really kind of establishing this methodology for people. I do have my own practice, and I see people here in my private practice in Florida, and really my focus is just helping people find a way to be integrated with their health. And so my practice is called the Integrative NP, because I like to balance both what we would call traditional and non-traditional, or functional medicine and traditional medicine together, and help people have conversations. There is no better side. There is the best side is whatever is better for you, whatever is best for you. And my goal is to really be a guide for people to help them best fine-tune their healthcare with options. And so I pride myself on helping people with truly informed consent and understanding, okay, if we have a lipid issue, for example, and we have to deal with the possibility of a statin, well, what are the alternatives? And what can we do to see, when is it best used? When is it not best used? Is this a good choice for you? Is it not? So in my private practice, I focus mostly on the thyroid methodology, but I also work with a lot of people who, want to have that integrative approach. It's not just this is the only way, or like the other side where yoga will cure all your problems. No, it's kind of a mixture of both, and we can do it all together. And I help kind of guide people in that direction.
So you're managing with thyroid disease as well, it sounds like.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
That's awesome. So, and that's throughout Florida, I'm assuming they can come and see you. And
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Throughout the whole state. Yeah.
Great. For everyone listening, this is like one of the number one questions is who can I go see in my state? And that's one of the big states. So this is a great resource to make everyone aware of. So Patricia, thank you so much for your time. Backstage, you said this is the first time really going into the story. You did great. It didn't seem you couldn't have been better. It's tough to talk about your own stuff, especially as a practitioner, but people are going to really gain a lot from that. They'll really see their own situation in a new light, and it'll be a tremendous benefit. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me and allowing me to share this story. And I just hope that, someone hears it. I want to let them know that they're not alone. So, you're not alone. Someone's out there to listen to your story. Someone most likely has been through something very similar. And even if they're not, there's someone here to help listen. So thank you so much for having me.
That's great. All right. Dr. C with you. Another episode of Medical Myths, Legends, and Fairy Tales. Back with you again really soon. Take great care of yourself. Hey, Dr. Christianson here. Thanks so much for joining me for another episode. Is there a topic you'd like me to cover? I'd love to hear from you. Just go to Dr. Alan Christianson on Facebook or Instagram, write your question, and use the hashtag Medical Myths. Did you find this show helpful? If so, please take a minute and leave us a rating on iTunes so that others can know. Thanks much. I'll be back with you real soon. Bye-bye.